Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
All right. Welcome to the next episode of the Bank Marketing Show. We are glad to have you guys. We've really got a fun one today. Dan and I are looking forward to our guest, and thank all of you listeners for being here with us. And we'll go ahead and jump into the episode. Dan?
Yeah. So today on the show, we've got Adam Koishor, who's got about nearly 25 years of marketing experience at community banks, at regional credit unions. And he's overseen a lot of impressive growth on the marketing side in all of his roles. So he's got a lot of great stories for us today. You know, along that 25-year career, obviously a lot has happened on the technology side. Lots of, transformations into digital banking and approaching, marketing and customer experience differently. So we're excited to talk to him today. And, I think we've got a great episode coming up. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. A lot of pressure now. Hopefully I can make it fun and tell some interesting stories.
Yeah, I should have under-promised there, but we'll get into it. So I think the first thing for that came to mind when we're thinking about this episode with you is, the bank and credit union worlds are pretty different, right? And we don't talk to a lot of folks that have worked on both sides. So wanted to kind of address the elephant in the room there and start by talking a little bit about the credit union versus bank battle, right? From a marketer's perspective, not a lot of consumers kind of know the difference. A lot of them might not care. They might be interested in the fees or what the difference between a credit union and a bank means in terms of customer service or fees. But, what do you see the benefits of, credit unions versus banks, pros and cons of each? How do you think about the world?
Sure. I'll try to sum it up. There's a lot to talk about in that. So,
yeah.
What's interesting is you mentioned the experience, technology's become a big part of that conversation as well. Differences between credit unions and banks. It really comes down to the bottom line for the consumer. So the structure is really what the big difference is. Banks are for-profit. They have stockholders. They're trying to return a solid dividend every year to their stockholders. Credit unions, on the other hand, are owned by the people that have accounts with them. So it's really not for profit, after revenue. And it doesn't mean they don't earn profit, but after revenue and after setting money aside for capital to be solid, the money goes back to the people that have accounts with the credit union. In some cases, it's an annual bonus dividend and loan interest rebate. Not every credit union is able to do that. The one I worked for was able to do that for years. And that meant that the people that had accounts, the members, would get a benefit back into their savings account annually, just for having a relationship with the credit union. The bigger the relationship was, usually the more money they would get back. But there's some disadvantages for credit unions as well. Everyone talks about the tax benefit for credit unions, and that's the one that banks tend to really key on. And so credit unions don't pay income tax on their income, and banks typically don't like that. And I've been on both sides, obviously, as you mentioned. So what's interesting is, yes, credit unions don't pay income tax, but credit unions have some challenges as well. They're really limited to a geographic area that they can serve, a field membership. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. People that are going to join the credit union, whether that's open a checking account, a savings account, get an auto loan, a credit card, a mortgage, whatever it may be, a little tougher for the credit union to qualify people for membership. Typically, it's a county or region of counties, or even an affiliation to a workplace, an employer. So there is some limitations on the credit union side there. So it's not always as easy and as an advantage that banks see it. But banks also have the benefit of, we talked about technology and how important it is today. A lot of times banks are just bigger, more scale, and they can invest more in technology and provide a richer experience when it comes to mobile banking, for instance. So that, there are benefits to banks and, their scale and size. As an industry, credit unions across the country as an industry as a whole are much smaller than banks. So they have to collaborate and they work together real closely to try to provide the best service.
Yeah. So, Adam, I'm curious, Dan and I tend to approach everything with our marketing hats on, right? Yeah. So how do you see it, and what does your experience kind of tell you that you can share with us, really the marketing difference between those two types of financial institutions?
Well, what's interesting is that ties really closely into what Dan mentioned about whether consumers care. And I would argue from a marketing perspective, credit unions do have an advantage when it comes to returning value back to members. In some cases, they're able to provide, charge fewer fees, provide better rates on loans and higher rates on savings accounts and even checking nowadays. But really, from a marketing perspective, it comes down to telling that story. In my nearly 15 years in the credit union industry, it really was a brand story. Having a brand platform, telling that story as often as possible to hopefully make consumers care that it is a difference. Because I do believe that it was a benefit or a differentiator for credit unions. But consumers are busy, and the one thing that I always have preached is, and especially in the marketing messaging, make things simple. People are busy. They don't have time to sit down and think about what are the differences between credit unions and banks and what's the best choice for me. You have to tell that story every day. So
right. They're just to interject there. The consumers are sitting there thinking, what problem are you solving for me?
Yes.
Right. And it doesn't so much matter if it's a credit union or a bank at the end of the day, if that institution's there solving a problem, or positioning themselves with their marketing so that they're solving a problem. That's what's important.
In some cases, it's as simple as, how can you save me money on my auto loan? So, or how can you get me the best rate or help me buy my first home? Can you provide me with resources and the hand holding I may need to get through that process the first time to buy my first home?
Yeah. So, well, and it may be even beyond the rate discussion and all of that. It may be the pitch and marketing message of it's a membership benefit and the psyche that kind of goes with that versus the security. And, banks, we're FDIC insured, we're this, we're that, and it's a lot of those differentiators too, neither of which is, better or worse or whatever the case may be. But again, it's back to what, Dan, you make a great point, is what pain is it solving for the consumer, which probably largely depends on what does the consumer consider their pain point at that given time.
True. Yep. That's a very, very true statement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Adam, tell us a little bit more about your experience.
So, as Dan mentioned, I've seen a lot of change in 25 years, but especially the pace of that change has increased immensely. Over the past 5 years or so, you've seen huge jumps in technology and how services are delivered to consumers. And from a marketing perspective, it's really all about making sure that you're where the consumers live. We've talked about being, everyone's on a device all day long now. So shifting dollars from traditional advertising channels to digital channels and making sure that your messaging is getting to the right people at the right time. That's become huge. And that shift will continue, I think, over the years. People want things at their fingertips now. They're so conditioned to have everything in their hand, on their phone, when they want it. And from a marketing perspective, you have to be able to get to them where they live. The other big thing I've seen in my experience, is data, the use of data. And if you're not leveraging data every day, now is the great time. And if you've been talking about data and you're just not quite where you want to be yet, take the time, put budget toward it. It's so important to really understand not only who your current consumers are, but how do you attract more that look like them? What does the messaging need to be? Where are you going? What tools, what channels are you using to get to them? What's important to them? Data is definitely key. I've done a lot of things in my career as far as, yes, using an MCIF every day, but my suggestion would be go to your MCIF provider, your data file provider, and ask them if they have append data that you can append to your data file. Get as much data in that system as you can possibly get. It's important. It makes you more strategic and smarter, definitely, not only to attract new members or new customers, new consumers, but really to track that progress as well. So, data is big. Video content has become king. People consume video all day long, all the time, and providing your messaging through video content is very important, and I think that'll continue to grow as well. So no different than us being on this video call today.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the point about data is definitely a soapbox of mine too, right? I think every bank, every credit union's got just super rich, customer demographic profile data, transactional data, setting aside kind of compliance concerns and things like that, which have to be part of the mix, but there's so much that you can do with the transactional data, right? Like running a campaign for very, very specific use cases. People with lines of credit that haven't taken a draw in several months, and you can reach out to them to see what's going on. High balances that don't have wealth management, those types of things. I think today, like the banks and credit unions that stand out are the ones that can speak to those use cases, because that's really, I talk to banks a lot about the reason a lot of fintechs have been successful is they hone in on a real specific use case. What are your thoughts on that sort of proliferation of that and, using data and tech to kind of get to that point? Like, how have you, utilized like an MCIF type of solution to do that kind of analysis?
Where you mentioned transactions. I mean, you have transaction data all the time. People are using a debit card, a credit card, an ATM. Where they're purchasing things, where they're shopping, and it gives you a great insight into their behavior and what their needs may be. Now, I think the next step is, how do you stay one step ahead of the consumer based on their behavior and present things that they may need, in some cases before they even know they need it? So, it's the Amazon approach, and the Amazon approach is the big one. They're suggesting things for you to buy before you may need or think you need to buy them.
Well, you mentioned that the user experience side, where the bank's not competing directly with Amazon, but you kind of are on user experience.
Exactly. No doubt. And I think banks will get there. And there may be some that are already doing a pretty good job of it, but I think, if you're at the home improvement store 14 times in a month, that may be a real good indicator that there's services or products you need that could be helpful to you. Home equity line of credit, for example. And, you have all the financial information there. You should know whether that person, one, has enough equity to qualify for it, and two, whether they can qualify for a line of credit. So, I think it really comes down to, how do you take that next step using the data, but then using the technology to really put it into play in a similar way to what you're seeing in that, retail space online.
Absolutely. Yeah. Adam, there are a number of our bank clients, especially as we maybe onboard a new client or a credit union, and we start having the conversations with them about digital marketing. But I think very often in our society today, you start bumping into privacy questions and all these types of things where, it's kind of seen as the big bad scenario out there, if you will. But then when we explain what you just mentioned, Adam, which was a great point about, it is a service to that consumer if the opportunity for a HELOC or, a good mortgage opportunity for first-time home buyers because they're in the middle of shopping for wedding dresses and all these types of things. So they're obviously at a juncture time in life. So, in providing those opportunities and information to a localized audience, I know it's changing the game in marketing. You mentioned the transition from traditional to digital. Well, no wonder, and yes, traditional marketing for branding, et cetera, certainly has its place, no doubt. So we still preach that. But so given all that information and a lot of what you were just saying, where do you think this is going? I mean, you've sat in this marketing officer role on, in both seats for bank and credit union. Where do you see some of this going?
Well, I really truly believe as the technology becomes better for financial institutions, I think leveraging that data, you're going to see a point where I'm going to get an application for a loan or an approval for, let's say, an auto loan because my car's been in the shop, and had service work done, and I see the payment on a credit or debit card. I think it's going to become really easy where it's one click on your phone, you get the new loan pre-approved, you're ready to shop for a vehicle, and in most cases, and I know a lot of credit union shops are heavy into indirect lending. Now you're starting to see and be able to buy a car online without ever going to a dealer. And, I think that technology is just going to continue to increase and improve where you're going to be able to get the services you need with one click and agree to everything you need to agree to and buy a car without ever going anywhere. And I think the traditional dealers are going to be, they're going to play in that online space as well at some point, more heavily than they already are. I think it's just going to be a matter of, being one step ahead of the consumer and being able to provide when they say, hey, I need a credit card, I need to consolidate debt, I need a new checking account, whatever those needs are. I think being a step ahead of them and having everything ready and it be one click away is going to be where we head. If you talk to anyone, they're always busy. And I think anything we can do to simplify the banking process or, the procedure for them, and there's still a lot of things that have to happen, but I think banks and credit unions are starting to figure out a lot of that can be done on the back end and make the life of the consumer easier.
Yeah, I think what's interesting in that too is, a lot of it's interesting, but even if you have, let's say a deposit customer, right? It's easy to forget that, at scale across all your, tens of thousands of customers, it's easy to forget that they're your customer, but they're not necessarily your customer on every single product, right? Or they may have been a deposit customer for 20 years, but next time they need a car, they're going to think of you first. And so, being a step ahead, if you make things easy, maybe that cuts out that research phase, right? Oh, well, I can just get this loan through my bank and it's super easy. I don't have to worry about it. That's, I think, if you can get your data and, marketing practice to that point, that's kind of the holy grail, but it's hard, right? That you can do the data analytics, but if your messaging falls flat or your messaging doesn't speak directly to that problem, you might as well not have done the data analytics side either.
Well, and I do believe, as Chris said earlier, I think there's a place for always building brand and being top of mind. I think that's a part of that equation as well. I mean, you want people to know who you are and think of you first, even if you're not able to get to that holy grail and deliver when they need it, they still need to know who you are. You need to be thinking about brand awareness and where you're at in telling your story, because I think it's huge. I think it's important, especially the smaller organizations. I mean, when you're talking about some of the big national banks, that's one thing they do less of. And in some cases, they're still doing it, but when you see a location on every corner, makes that branding story a little easier to tell because you already know who they are and where they're located.
Right.
So as a consumer.
Yeah.
So Adam, in that, I think a lot of our listeners out there are, in the community bank and small, as you mentioned, smaller credit union spectrum. Okay. Dan's agency and mine both have multi-billion-dollar bank clients, but those are marketing departments. Okay. So, but for the rest of the world and, the institutions that have a marketing person that is also event planner and, other things, to those that maybe have a full-time marketing director or a staff or two, or maybe you're utilizing an agency as an outsource help. What are some of the maybe success tips that you've said, hey, we tried a little of this, it didn't work, but we tried a little of this and, punch the gas on that one. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is figure out a way to budget for automation. I mean, if you can automate onboarding processes, you can automate, an annual or quarterly or monthly marketing program. I mean, automate that as much as you can. It's fairly hands off, but the key to that is you have to track. So you need to know what's happening. What do the results look like? Where do I need to make adjustments? So it isn't completely hands off, but it will make your life easier as far as making sure things are getting done. You're getting your message out there. You're hitting the right people at the right times. If you're not doing onboarding, get an onboarding program built. Provide value in that onboarding program. Automate it and provide value. Go to your front line and ask them, or your call center, what are the top 10 questions that a new customer asks us? And answer those 10 questions the early part of that onboarding, and then move down the matrix or down the road a little bit with them about, hey, I see you have a checking account. You probably have an auto loan somewhere else. You probably have a credit card somewhere else. Here's our offering. Can we get you in these other products to build that relationship? So automation's huge. If you're a small shop and you're that one marketing person who's running in 12 different directions, if there's a way you can get automation done, and in some cases, a plug for the two of you, it takes a partner to help you get that started. So.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's pretty hands off, but there's a huge lift to get it all set up and to get there's a learning curve, and then it makes life a lot easier. But that there's a big ramp up. We were talking about the getting more specific, use cases and problems solved, and like the automation side's like the flip side, right? The more specific you get with use cases, the more use cases that you have, and the more you need the more you need an automation tool to make sense of it all.
Yes.
Yeah, up and down our hallway here, one of our favorite stories was a client that we were onboarding their email marketing process. Gosh, this was right in the middle of the early part of the pandemic. So almost 2 years ago, we were doing that. And as we onboarded them, we went into their email marketing platform, and their last 3 months had an average bounce rate of 63%. Okay. For their email marketing. And we said, so when was the last time you uploaded new lists? Oh, well, I think we started using that platform in 20 whatever, and it had been like 3 or 4 years since they had even updated it. And we're like, guys, which is why fortunately they realized that they needed a partner. But yes, it's automating those systems. And I love that, Adam, but it's doing it and doing it well and ways that you can maintain it and having a deliberate process. Those are great thoughts.
One thing that I can recommend, if you have an MCIF and you can tie your automation platform, whether it's an email platform, to that MCIF, so it's getting the correct data and updated data on a regular basis, that's an ideal scenario. So I know in my past I've used an MCIF that had an integrated email platform. So the data was fresh all the time. The other thing that would happen is the data would flow between the two systems, so tracking was easier as well.
How do you think that scenario sort of works for the smaller bank, right? Do you know what's kind of the equivalent there? I have some thoughts, but curious to know what you think.
That MCIF tool is huge, and if you're not automating an email program, now's a great time to be thinking about doing that. Those two tools together are huge. If you have to get data from a core and get it done, it's very possible to do that. Dan, I'm not sure if that's where you were headed with this.
No, I just, not to put you on the spot, but
if you have somebody in-house that can really pull data from the core and pull it well and update your records so you can do more marketing and do it more strategically and accurately, then that has to be the solution or one of the solutions.
Yeah, no, I think it's right. I think for the real small institutions that you're right that don't have space for the MCIF, it's can you pull data, or can you pull even a sample of data and do some analysis, right? And you're not starting with 100 use cases. You're starting with like 5, right? The 5 sort of things that'll drive the most revenue. And if you limit the number of use cases, you might even be able to do some of that analysis in a, even in like a pivot table or something like that to get started, and then get more sophisticated from there.
And the next step to all of that is make sure your branch staffs know what you're doing. Make sure when, Joe or Sally walk into the branch, if they come in, make sure your staff knows what marketing materials have gone to them. Make sure that they're able to have the same conversation with them about whether it's an offer, for an auto loan or, a refinance on a home loan. Make sure that your people know what you're marketing, what messaging you're putting out there to who.
Yeah, that is so important, and that's a great tip. And I think nothing's worse than for somebody to walk into a branch or be in communication with, with a loan officer or even with a teller, and or anybody that's such an important frontline role, and they say, "Well, it was so great when I got this email about this," or whatever the case may be, and they get this blank stare back, like, I don't even have the foggiest idea what you're talking about. So, Adam, that's a great point about communication, about internal communication.
CRM is huge in that case. I mean, use the tools; they're out there. So,
yeah. But Dan, when we were doing our pre-show talk on this, we knew that Adam was going to be one of these guests that, we could literally go on all day. And Adam, this has really been some very juicy and helpful information, I think. And we'll have to put you on the cyclical list to circle you back, because we know that we could continue to have a great conversation with this. So
keep you on point for your predictions.
Hey, that's fine.
There you go.
And there is a ton of ground to cover. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So but we like to segue here as we go through the shows, Adam, into our closing questions and lightning round, and gives us an opportunity to get a little more insight from you and kind of dig into Adam's brain a little bit about some of the things with you. So go ahead and run with it, Dan.
Yeah. All right. So lightning round. Let's start. Can you share a personal best and or a business best, meaning something really great that great experience you want to share with the listeners?
Personal best, I want to say there's so many of them with my kids. My daughter graduated college. That's huge thing as a parent, I think. Very proud of that moment. Every day's still a challenge, but there are a lot of things as a parent that make you very proud as your kids grow up. So business best, I think the biggest one that I point to at the credit union I was at, building brand. And part of the way we did that was community involvement, building an employee volunteer program. And, there's so many great things and relationships and things that came out of that program. I think that's a big one.
Great. All right. Number 2, give us a favorite book.
That's a tough one. I don't have one favorite, but I read a lot of leadership books, and there are many out there. And I'm always on the search for a new one. Because I love to hear perspective on leadership. And, no two leaders are exactly alike. And it's great to hear the perspectives from many different people on how they position themselves as an effective leader.
All right. Number 3, give us a show or two, a TV show or two that you've streamed. What was the last thing what's something we could catch you binging?
Ozark was the last one I was trying to get caught up on. There's new stuff coming out on that one. I've really enjoyed it. Oddly, my wife and I weren't in the know, apparently. Not that we didn't know this existed, but we've gone back and been watching Sopranos. as well. And I know that's a throwback, but I don't think I ever watched the full series. I saw bits and pieces when it was on back in the day, but it's been fun to go back and watch that one.
Yeah, we got to that show late too, so it's a good one.
Yeah, but that's a foundational one, man. That's before streaming was cool. So
that's right.
Absolutely.
All right, number 4. What is the most impactful piece of advice you've ever received?
I had a mentor one time that said, when you make a mistake, take responsibility. And the second part of that advice was find a way to prevent that mistake from happening again. Don't blame other people, but also, so learn from it. And the real bottom line to it was, he told me, you will earn people's respect if you take responsibility when you make a mistake. Everybody makes a mistake. You don't have to beat people up when it happens. Just make sure they learn from it. They take responsibility. You'll earn a lot of respect from people.
That's a great one. Flip side of that one, what is a piece of advice you always tell your staff or your clients?
Staff's an easy one. I always tell staff, speak up. There's a reason you're here. Give your opinion, give your perspective. If something doesn't smell right or feel right, speak up. That's how the team is better at what the team does when it comes to marketing. And we all know marketing's not a perfect science. There's a lot of trial and error until you find things that work and you move forward. So it takes a team of people. And if you have a smart team, let them talk, listen to them, because it's important.
Great. All right.
That's great.
The last one's a softball, but if people have questions for you or want to get in touch, how could they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. That's the biggest one. And then I'll give my email address if that's all right with you guys. I'm more than happy to talk with people.
Yeah, we'll post that in the show notes. Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's AJ Koishor, so AJKoishor @gmail.com. So I'm always happy to talk shop. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'd love to come back. I think there's a whole bunch more to discuss and dig into.
Yeah, likewise. We'll link up your LinkedIn profile and email in the show notes, and we'll have you back. You'll be like the Bill Murray of to our Letterman. You'll come back every 6 months or so.
There you go.
There you go. Love it. Well, Adam, this has been great. This has certainly been some awesome industry insight, and you bring an awful lot of years of expertise and experience. So we appreciate you joining us today and taking the time to share that with us and with our listeners. It's been really great having you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Love the conversation and the opportunity.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much.
We'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.